I was still holding the small navy gift bag when I heard my daughter-in-law say, once she signs, we can list the house before summer. I stopped behind the restaurant's carved wooden partition, close enough to see their table through the narrow gaps. My son Michael lifted his champagne glass. She already told me the house was mine eventually. Lauren's mother, Diane, leaned forward. At her age, she does not need $640,000 sitting in a house. She needs something smaller, safer, easier to manage. Then Michael laughed. She trusts me. If I call it estate planning, she'll sign. On my 70th birthday, my only son had told me he was too busy to have dinner with me. He was not too busy. He was dividing my home before I was dead. That morning had begun quietly. I woke before sunrise as I had almost every day since Thomas died 6 years earlier. For a few seconds, I lay still beneath the pale blue quilt, listening for the sound of him in the bathroom or the soft scrape of his slippers in the hallway. Grief has habits. Even after years, it sometimes forgets the person is gone. The house felt especially large that morning. Morning light moved slowly across the bedroom wall, touching the framed photograph of Thomas and me on our 25th anniversary. He'd been laughing because the photographer told him to look serious. I was 70 years old. The number felt heavier than I expected. Not frightening, just undeniable. Downstairs, I made coffee and opened the birthday cards that had arrived the day before. One from Carol, one from Rebecca, 2 from former colleagues at the hospital. Michael's had not come. I told myself he was bringing it in person. At 10, I called him. He answered on the 4th ring. Mom, hey. I could hear typing in the background. Am I interrupting? Kind of buried, but what's up? I smiled despite the sting. I thought we might have dinner tonight, just the 2 of us. Maybe Bellamy's. There was a pause. Bellamy's had been Thomas's favorite restaurant. Michael knew that. Tonight. It is my birthday. Of course, I know that. His voice softened just enough to sound sincere. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm dealing with a client disaster. The regional team dropped the ball and I may be here until 10. Oh, I hate this. It's all right. No, it isn't. We'll do something Saturday, a real celebration. I looked at the vase of grocery store tulips I had bought for myself. Saturday is fine. You're the best. The line went dead. For the next several hours, I moved around the house without purpose. I dusted the mantel, watered plants that did not need water, folded a blanket twice. At noon, Carol called and offered to take me to lunch, but I said Michael and I had plans later. I did not tell her he had canceled. Pride becomes strange as you age. You care less about appearances in most things, yet loneliness can still feel embarrassing. By 5:30, the house had become unbearable. I changed into a dark green dress Thomas had always liked and put on the pearl earrings he gave me for our 40th anniversary. Then I drove to Bellamy's alone. The restaurant sat downtown in a converted bank building with high arched windows and brass lamps glowing against dark paneled walls. The air smelled of butter, seared beef, and red wine. A pianist played something soft near the bar. The hostess smiled when she saw my name. Mrs. Whitmore, happy birthday. Thank you. Will you be joining the rest of your party? I frowned. My party. She glanced toward the dining room. Your son arrived about 40 minutes ago. He said the reservation was under Whitmore. The room seemed to narrow. Could you show me? Of course. I followed her past white tablecloths, low candles, and couples leaning toward one another in conversation. Then I saw him. Michael sat in a curved leather booth beneath a brass chandelier. Lauren was beside him. Diane sat across from them. A silver champagne bucket stood beside the table. Oysters, steak, and a lobster dish covered the white linen between them. Michael was not wearing work clothes. He wore the navy blazer I had given him at Christmas. The hostess started forward. I touched her arm. Wait, something in my voice made her stop. A decorative partition separated us from the booth. I moved behind it, hidden by carved wooden leaves and potted greenery. That was when I heard them discussing my house, my mortgage-free home, the house Thomas and I bought when Michael was 9. The house where I packed his school lunches, cleaned blood from his scraped knees, helped with college applications, and held him after his father's funeral. My name was still on the reservation card in my hand. The gift bag held a watch I had bought for Michael because I thought he was working too hard. Diane continued. The market is strong now. If you wait until she needs care, everything gets complicated. Lauren lowered her voice. We found a senior community 20 minutes from us. Michael said Mom will fight moving. Not if you frame it correctly, Diane replied. Tell her the stairs are dangerous. Tell her Sophie worries. My stomach turned. Sophie was my granddaughter, 17 years old. They were planning to use her affection as leverage. Lauren lifted her glass. Once the trust is signed, can we access the equity immediately? Depends how it's structured, Michael said. But yes, eventually. What about your mother's lawyer? She barely talks to Rebecca anymore. That was not true, but the confidence with which he said it frightened me. Then Michael reached into his wallet and placed a card beside the bill folder. I recognized it immediately. The emergency credit card connected to my account. I had given it to him 3 years earlier when Sophie needed surgery, and Michael said he was short on cash. For family emergencies, I had told him. Apparently, champagne with Diane qualified. I stepped away from the partition before any of them saw me. The hostess looked worried. Mrs. Whitmore, are you all right? Yes. My voice sounded far away. Could I have a table somewhere else? She led me to a small corner near the windows. I ordered soup I did not eat and 1 glass of wine I barely touched. At the end, the waiter brought a slice of chocolate cake with a single candle. Happy birthday, he said gently. I blew it out. Then I called the card issuer and froze Michael's emergency card. As I walked through the lobby, I heard a disturbance behind me. A waiter explaining that the payment had been declined. Michael's voice rising. Diane asking whether they had another card. I did not turn around. My phone began ringing before I reached the parking garage. Michael, then Lauren, then Michael again. I sat inside my car with both hands on the steering wheel while the screen lit up over and over. My son believed I had missed my own birthday dinner. What he did not know was that I had heard them divide my home before I was even dead. I let the phone ring until the screen went dark. Then it lit again. Michael. I watched his name appear 5 times before I finally turned the phone face down on the passenger seat. The parking garage smelled of damp concrete, gasoline, and cold metal. Somewhere below me, a car alarm chirped twice. My birthday cake sat untouched in a white cardboard box beside my purse. I should have been furious. Instead, I felt hollow. Anger came later. That night, I drove home through streets blurred by rain and traffic lights. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. For the first time in 32 years, I looked at it not as a home, but as something other people had already converted into numbers. $640,000. Potential equity. Senior community. Trust documents. Words spoken over champagne while I sat 20 yards away on my own birthday. Inside, I removed my earrings and placed them beside Thomas's photograph. You warned me, I whispered. 6 months before he died, Thomas had said something I dismissed as bitterness. Michael is starting to think help is the same as ownership. I had defended our son. He's under pressure. We were under pressure for 40 years, Thomas said. We never treated someone else's work as already ours. At the time, I accused him of being harsh. Now the memory sat in my chest like a stone. At 7:08 the next morning, Michael sent his first message. Mom, why was the emergency card declined? At 7:11, were you hacked? Then, please call me. Last night was humiliating. I stared at that sentence. His humiliation. Not my birthday. Not the lie. Not the conversation about my house. The declined card. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table. At 8:03, I replied. The card was issued for emergencies. I froze it because it was being used for personal dining. His response arrived immediately. It was a family dinner. I read it twice. Then I set the phone down. That one sentence explained more than any apology could have. In Michael's mind, family meant that my money automatically belonged in the room. By 10, I had opened the filing cabinet in Thomas's old study. The records went back years. I had always kept them carefully because hospital administration trained a person to distrust memory and respect documentation. The first large transfer was $52,000 toward Michael and Lauren's home down payment. They had promised to repay us after Michael's annual bonus. They never did. Then $18,000 for credit card debt. Michael said high interest was destroying them. Thomas insisted on a signed repayment schedule. I persuaded him not to. He already feels ashamed, I said. Thomas looked at me for a long time. Shame is useful when it changes behavior. I called him unkind. 3 months later, Michael leased a new SUV. I kept going through the records. $11,500 towards Sophie's private school tuition after Michael claimed a commission check had been delayed. $9,000 for transmission repairs and insurance. $4,000 for a temporary cash flow problem. $6,000 for emergency dental work that insurance supposedly refused to cover. Then dozens of smaller transfers. $800, $1,200, $2,000. Each one seemed manageable by itself. Together, they formed a pattern. I made a spreadsheet. By lunchtime, the total exceeded $110,000. That did not include birthday gifts, vacations, furniture, or the emergency card. I leaned back in Thomas's chair. The leather creaked beneath me. For years, I had told myself I was preserving my relationship with Michael. But the records suggested something less flattering. I had been paying to avoid disappointing him. Carol arrived at 2 carrying chicken salad sandwiches and the expression of a woman who already knew I had lied about my birthday plans. "You said you were having dinner with Michael." I thought I was. She placed the sandwiches on the counter. What happened? I told her everything. She listened with both hands wrapped around a cup of tea. When I finished, she asked one question. Did helping him make him kinder or only more certain you would help again? I looked toward the window. A cardinal sat on the fence outside bright red against the gray afternoon. I don't know. Yes, you do. Carol had been widowed 3 years before me. She understood how easily grief could turn adult children into the center of a life. I thought if I made things easier for him, he would have more time for us. And did he? Number. The answer remained unspoken. After Carol left, I began gathering the dishes from our last Sunday dinner. That was when I found the folder. It had slipped behind a side table near the den. Michael's initials were written on the tab. Inside were brochures for senior communities. Smiling women with silver hair painted pottery, walked gardens and drank coffee beneath bright windows. One brochure had been circled. Oak Meadow Independent Living. 28 minutes from Michael's house. On top of the brochures sat a handwritten checklist. Mom, next steps. Financial POA transfer house to family trust. Equity access reduce maintenance burden. Move before winter update beneficiaries. Beside house value, Michael had written, approximately $640,000. My hands went cold. This was not an idea mentioned casually over dinner. It was a plan. I called Rebecca Sloan. She had handled Thomas's estate and updated my will after his death. Her receptionist offered an appointment the following week. This cannot wait, I said. Rebecca called me back herself. 30 minutes later, I was sitting in her office beneath a framed photograph of the Blue Ridge Mountains. She read the checklist slowly. Have you signed anything? Number. Power of attorney. Number. Deed transfer trust amendment LLC documents. Number. Good. The word loosened something in my chest. Rebecca folded her hands. Michael cannot sell, borrow against, or transfer your home without legal authority from you. He thinks I'll give it to him. That is different from owning it. I showed her the emergency card statements. Together we reviewed 18 months of charges. Restaurants, hotels, a jewelry store, a resort spa, premium gas. The total unauthorized personal spending was $14,732. I felt embarrassed. I should have checked. Trust is not negligence, Rebecca said. But once you see a pattern, ignoring it becomes a choice. She advised me to cancel the card, entirely change account passwords, and update my emergency contacts. We also reviewed my existing will. The house still passed directly to Michael. I stared at his name. Do I change it now? Not while you're angry. I'm not only angry. I know. That is why we gather facts first. That evening, Michael called again. This time I answered. Mom, we need to talk. Yes, Sunday dinner, our house. What about protecting you, protecting the house, making sure everything stays in the family? His voice was warm again. Careful. I looked at the checklist on my kitchen table. I'll come, I said. For years, I had told myself I was giving my son security. The records showed I had been giving him permission to expect more. Michael's house looked exactly as it always did from the street. Warm porch lights, trimmed hedges, a wreath on the front door even though Christmas was still weeks away. For years, that house had reassured me. It was proof that Michael was settled, that Lauren was happy, that Sophie had a stable place to grow up. That Sunday evening, I saw something different. A mortgage I had helped make possible. Furniture bought after debts I had paid. A polished front porch built on years of my willingness to say yes. Lauren opened the door before I rang. There she is. She hugged me lightly, careful not to disturb her blouse. We've been worried about you. I've been home. That's what I mean, alone. The word was placed gently but deliberately. Diane was already in the living room with a glass of white wine. She stood when I entered and kissed the air near my cheek. Happy belated birthday. Thank you. We were all so disappointed things got confused at the restaurant. Confused, not dishonest. Not hidden, confused. Michael came in from the kitchen carrying a tray of drinks. Mom. He smiled and kissed my forehead. No mention of the lie. No apology. Just warmth as though affection could erase chronology. Dinner was pot roast, mashed potatoes, and green beans. The meal was pleasant in the careful way family dinners become pleasant when everyone is waiting for the real conversation to begin. Diane talked about a friend who had fallen on her basement stairs. Lauren mentioned a woman at church whose mother forgot to renew her homeowner's insurance. Michael asked whether I had ever considered installing a walk-in shower. Each story pointed in the same direction. Age, risk, management. I set down my fork. You all seem very concerned about stairs. Lauren gave a small laugh. We're concerned about you. I've lived in that house 32 years. Exactly, Diane said. Sometimes familiarity makes people ignore danger. I looked at her. Does it? She lifted her wine. Of course. After dinner, Michael brought a gray folder to the table. Can we talk about planning? I glanced at Lauren. She was already sitting straighter. Diane moved her chair closer. Michael opened the folder. The goal is simple. We want to make things easier for you before there's an emergency. He turned the first document toward me. Durable Financial Power of Attorney. My name appeared at the top. Michael's appeared beneath it. What authority does this give you? I asked. Only what you authorize. That isn't what the document says. He blinked. You've read it. I'm reading it now. The next section granted him authority over banking investments, taxes, real estate insurance, and legal claims. Broad authority, not emergency help. Control. I'd be able to step in if needed, he said. Who decides when it's needed? We would. Who is we? Michael glanced at Lauren. The family. I turned the page. The second document created the Whitmore Family Property Trust. Michael was named trustee. I was the grantor. The house would be transferred into the trust. Who controls the trust? I asked. I would manage it. Can you sell the house? Only if necessary. Can you borrow against it? He leaned back. Potentially for family needs. What family needs? Lauren answered. Repairs, care, Sophie's education, emergencies. Diane added, at 70 peace of mind matters more than technical ownership. I looked at her. Technical ownership. You know what I mean? No, I don't. The room quieted. I placed one finger on the page. If the house goes into this trust, Michael controls decisions. He protects decisions, Lauren said. From whom? No one answered. I turned to the borrowing provision. It allowed the trustee to mortgage or pledge trust property. No second signature required. No independent review. No restriction on proceeds. Where is Sophie protected? I asked. Michael frowned. What do you mean? You said this is partly about her education. She's our daughter. That is not a legal answer. Lauren's face tightened. There doesn't need to be a separate provision. Then this is not for Sophie. Michael exhaled sharply. Mom, you're getting lost in legal language. I'm asking plain questions. You don't need to treat me like a stranger. I'm not. It feels like you are. Diane leaned forward. Eleanor, this is what family does. You place things where the next generation can manage them. I am still managing them. No one said you weren't. You just handed me papers that say otherwise. Michael's patience began to thin. Dad always trusted me. The lie was immediate. Thomas had loved Michael. He had not trusted him with unchecked money. I folded the first document closed. Rebecca will review everything. Michael stared at me. Why? Because she is my attorney. You don't need a lawyer between you and your son. If the papers are routine, her review should not matter. His jaw tightened. Lauren stood and began clearing plates that did not need clearing. Diane looked offended on Michael's behalf. I think this is becoming unnecessarily formal. It was formal when the documents were drafted. No one responded. I carried my water glass into the kitchen. On the counter beside Michael's laptop sat a yellow legal pad. At the top in his handwriting, Mom's house projected value $640,000. Below it, possible credit line $300,000, pay card $74,000, business reserve $95,000, Diane relocation, $60,000 tax buffer renovations before sale. I stared at the line with Diane's name. They were not only planning to use my house to solve their debts, they were planning to finance her future with it. I heard footsteps in the hall. I took one photograph and set the pad exactly where I found it. Sophie appeared in the doorway. Grandma. Her face was pale. What is it? She looked toward the dining room. Are they making you sell your house? Number. They keep talking about moving you. I know. They said you're too sentimental to understand what it's worth. The words hurt more from her mouth. Sophie, none of this is your fault. I heard Mom say they could use the equity before college bills start. Did they ask you to talk to me? She hesitated. Dad said you listened to me. I closed my eyes briefly. They had planned to turn her love into pressure. I touched her arm. You do not need to persuade me of anything. Are you mad at them? I'm learning the truth. That sounds worse. It may be. When I left, Michael followed me onto the driveway. The evening air was cold enough to sting my cheeks. Mom, don't let Rebecca poison this. She hasn't said anything yet? You know what I mean? No, I know what you want. He stepped closer. That house is going to be mine anyway. There it was. Not care. Not planning. Ownership. I met his eyes. Eventually is not the same as already. His face changed. For the first time that evening, the charm disappeared entirely. I got into my car and closed the door. The restaurant conversation had not been fantasy. The papers were already prepared. They were not waiting to inherit my house. They were waiting for me to surrender it while I was still living inside it. Rebecca read every page twice. The first time she used a yellow legal pad and made small notes in the margins. The second time she removed her glasses, leaned back in her chair, and looked at me with the kind of expression doctors use before delivering news they wish were less serious. These documents are not designed to simplify your life, she said. They are designed to transfer decision-making authority away from you. I sat across from her in the quiet conference room, my hands folded over the photograph I had taken of Michael's legal pad. Outside the window, bare branches moved against a pale November sky. What could he do if I signed? Rebecca tapped the power of attorney. With this language, he could access accounts, manage investments, communicate with insurers, and sign certain financial documents on your behalf. Then she tapped the trust draft. With the house transferred here and Michael acting as trustee, he could potentially borrow against the property, sell it under broad circumstances, or move proceeds into accounts he controls, without asking me. Depending on how aggressively he interpreted these provisions, yes, the room seemed colder. I had expected manipulation. I had not expected architecture. This was not a careless son making an impulsive request. It was a system built to turn my consent into his authority. Rebecca slid the documents away. We are going to replace your current power of attorney immediately. Michael is listed now. As successor agent, yes, Thomas was primary. After his death, Michael became next in line. I had forgotten that. The realization frightened me more than I wanted to admit. He had not needed my new signature to hold some future authority. He was already standing inside an old document I had signed when I trusted him. By noon, we had begun changing everything. Carol became my financial and healthcare agent with Rebecca's office named as backup. My bank added verbal password protection. The brokerage firm restricted online transfers and required direct confirmation from me for any change above $5,000. I removed Michael from account alerts, canceled the emergency card permanently, and changed the locks on the filing cabinet in Thomas's study. None of it felt triumphant. It felt like installing smoke detectors after smelling something burn. 2 days later, an appraiser came to the house. He moved quietly from room to room, measuring walls, checking windows, taking photographs of the kitchen roofline and finished basement. I followed him through spaces that still carried pieces of my life. The pencil marks inside the pantry door where Thomas had measured Michael's height. The dent in the hallway trim from the day Michael tried to carry a bicycle upstairs. The faint discoloration near the living room hearth where Sophie once spilled purple juice. The appraiser saw square footage. I saw years. His report arrived the next morning. Estimated market value $642,000. I stared at the number for a long time. It was close enough to Michael's estimate to confirm that he had already done his research. Rebecca proposed placing the home into a revocable living trust that I would control completely during my lifetime. If you become incapacitated, she explained, your chosen successor follows written instructions. No one can borrow against the house for personal debts. Your care comes first. And after I die, you decide. My eyes went to the section marked beneficiaries. Michael's name remained blank. Leaving it blank felt like standing at the edge of something permanent. He is still my son. Yes, if I remove him, it feels as though I'm saying, I don't love him. Rebecca's voice softened. A will is not a certificate of love, Ellie. It is a set of instructions. I looked down. Love had become confused with access for so long that separating them felt almost cruel. Rebecca continued. You can revise the plan later, but your current documents reward the exact behavior that frightened you. We created a separate education trust for Sophie, funded directly and managed independently. No parent could borrow from it. No spouse could redirect it. Sophie would receive tuition books and reasonable living expenses. Her future would not be used as a reason to pressure me. Michael's messages began that evening. At first they were gentle. A photograph of him at 7 missing his front teeth. Remember this? You made that Halloween costume yourself. The next day, a picture of Thomas holding Michael after a baseball game. Dad always wanted the family to stay close. Then, I'm worried about you living alone. The stairs are dangerous. You know I'm your only child. Each message reached backward toward tenderness, while pushing forward toward control. Lauren sent listings for senior communities. One had a swimming pool, a salon, and a cheerful dining room filled with people who look like actors pretending not to be lonely. This one is beautiful, she wrote. You'd have so much less to worry about. Diane's message arrived Friday morning. At our age, the greatest joy is watching the younger generation benefit from what we built. Holding too tightly only creates conflict. I read it once. Then I saved a screenshot. I did not reply. By Saturday, I understood that silence was making them nervous. So I called Michael. I've been thinking about the trust. His tone changed instantly. Warmth flooded his voice. I'm glad, Mom. I don't want conflict. Neither do I. I may be ready to discuss it again. He exhaled almost too audibly. That's all I wanted. I could picture him smiling at Lauren across the room. Why don't we come to your house Monday, he suggested. We can make dinner. I'll bring the documents. Rebecca should be there. A pause. Then, of course, and Sophie, if you want. I do. I can bring a mobile notary. The eagerness beneath his calm voice was unmistakable. That seems efficient, I said. After the call, I contacted Rebecca. He wants to bring a notary. I expected that. Should I cancel? No. Let him explain the documents in front of witnesses. You want me to let him think I'll sign. I want you to make no promises. Ask questions. Say nothing untrue. That afternoon, Sophie texted me. Can I come by alone? She arrived carrying her backpack and looking older than 17. We sat at the kitchen table. Without speaking, she unlocked her phone and handed it to me. A family group chat filled the screen. Michael. Once she signs, the equity is available. Lauren. We need it before the tax deadline. Diane. Do not let her lawyer complicate this. Keep the conversation emotional. Then another message from Michael. Use Sophie if you have to. Mom will do anything if she thinks college is at risk. My vision blurred. Not because I was surprised. Because there are some betrayals a mother understands intellectually before her heart agrees to accept them. Sophie began to cry. I'm sorry. I moved around the table and held her. You did nothing wrong. They were using me. Yes. Are you going to tell them I showed you? Number. Why? Because you are not going to become their target for telling the truth. That evening after Sophie left, I placed my old will on the dining room table. Beside it, I laid the new trust documents Rebecca had prepared. One set assumed Michael would protect everything I left behind. The other protected me from what he had become. Michael believed Monday's dinner would end with my signature beneath his plan. I intended to show him what my signature was actually worth. Michael arrived carrying white roses and a bottle of wine expensive enough to look like an apology. Lauren followed with a casserole dish covered in foil. Diane came behind them, wearing a cream coat and an expression of careful concern. Sophie entered last. She met my eyes for only a second. That was enough. Rebecca was already seated in the living room with a leather portfolio on her lap. Michael noticed her immediately, but his smile did not disappear. "Rebecca," he said, "I'm glad you could join us." "I thought it was important," she replied. He placed the flowers in my hands. "Happy belated birthday, Mom." The roses smelled faintly sweet and artificial beneath the stronger scent of Diane's perfume. "Thank you." For the first 20 minutes, everyone behaved as though we had gathered for an ordinary family dinner. Michael carved the roast. Lauren complimented my china. Diane admired the dining room and ran her fingertips along the edge of the oak table. "This house has held up beautifully," she said. "You could get an excellent price for it." Michael gave her a quick look. She smiled. "I only meant someday." "Someday," I repeated. The room went still for half a breath. Then Lauren asked Sophie about school and conversation moved on. After dessert, the doorbell rang. Michael stood too quickly. "That'll be the notary." A woman in her mid-50s entered carrying a black case and a small stamp kit. Michael introduced her as Ms. Green. "She's here just in case we decide to finalize anything he said." In case. The dining table had already been cleared except for the documents arranged in a precise stack. Yellow tabs marked the signature lines. Michael sat beside me. Lauren and Diane took the opposite side. Rebecca remained at the end of the table. Sophie stayed near the doorway. Michael opened the folder. "I know this has felt overwhelming," he began, "but the purpose is still simple. We want to protect you, preserve the house, and make sure Sophie's future is secure." I looked at him. "Then explain each document." He hesitated. "What do you mean?" "Start with the power of attorney." His expression tightened slightly, but he nodded. "This allows me to handle financial matters if you need help." "What financial matters?" "Banking, bills, insurance, real estate." "Can you act without asking me?" "Only if necessary." "That is not what the document says." Rebecca slid a copy toward him. "It grants immediate authority upon execution." Michael glanced at her. "That can be adjusted." "Why wasn't it adjusted before you brought a notary?" Lauren leaned forward. "Ellie, no one is trying to trick you." I did not say anyone was. "You're asking questions as if we are strangers." "I am asking questions because these are legal documents." Michael moved to the trust agreement. "This transfers the house into a family trust. I would manage it for everyone's benefit." "Who is everyone?" "The family." "Does the document name Sophie as a beneficiary?" He looked down. "Not specifically." "Does it name Lauren?" "Number." "Diane." Diane stiffened. "Why would it name me?" I removed the photograph from Rebecca's portfolio and placed it on the table. The yellow legal pad. The projected value of my home. The $300,000 credit line. The debts. The business reserve. The line that read, "Diane relocation $60,000. Diane's face went pale. Lauren stopped breathing for a moment. Michael stared at the photograph. "Where did you get that?" "It was on your kitchen counter. You photographed private notes." "They were notes about my house." "That doesn't give you the right." My name was at the top. Silence settled across the table. I turned to Diane. "Why was $60,000 from my home being set aside for your relocation?" She recovered first. "That was only a theoretical discussion about money you do not own. I never asked for your house." "No, you only discussed how its equity should be divided." Lauren pushed her chair back. "This is becoming hostile." "No," I said. "It is becoming specific." Michael rubbed a hand across his jaw. "Mom, the notes were preliminary. We were trying to look at all possible family obligations. Your credit cards were one obligation." His eyes flicked toward me. "Your business reserve was another. That money would have been repaid." "With what?" He did not answer. I placed the emergency card statements beside the photograph. $14,732. Restaurants, hotels, jewelry, spa charges, gas. Diane looked at Michael. "You said those were authorized." "They were family expenses," he said. I heard the same phrase he had texted after the restaurant. Family expenses, a language in which my money entered every room before I did. Then I placed another set of printed pages on the table. The group chat messages. Michael read the first line. "Once she signs, the equity is available." Lauren read the next. "We need it before the tax deadline." Diane reached for the pages. I moved them out of her reach. Michael's face changed when he saw his final message. Use Sophie if you have to. Mom will do anything if she thinks college is at risk. He turned toward his daughter. Sophie. She flinched. I spoke before he could continue. You will not question her. His eyes returned to me. She showed you private family messages. She told me the truth. I was trying to protect her college future. No, you were using her to frighten me. That's not fair. Was the message altered? He said nothing. Lauren began crying quietly. Not with grief, with anger. You have always assumed the worst about us. I almost laughed. For years, I assumed the best. I opened my own folder. Inside was the spreadsheet of every large transfer I had made to Michael's household. The $52,000 down payment, the $18,000 debt payment, the tuition, the vehicle costs, the smaller rescues, more than $110,000. Michael looked at the total and shook his head. You're keeping score now. No, I'm finally reading the record. I'm your son. Yes, you were going to leave me the house. I planned to. His voice rose. You can't just take it away. I looked directly at him. I cannot take away what you never owned. Diane crossed her arms. He is your only child, and I am still alive. The words landed harder than I expected. Michael's expression cracked. For the first time, I saw something other than calculation. Fear. Not of losing me, of losing what he expected from me. You're choosing money over family, he said. No, you chose the money before I changed anything. His face reddened. Dad never trusted me. You always controlled everything. Every dollar came with judgment. The accusation hurt because part of it contained truth. Thomas had been hard. I had often stepped between them. I may owe you apologies, I said. I do not owe you a $640,000 house. Rebecca opened the new trust. She explained each provision calmly. I retained control during my lifetime. My care came first. No one could borrow against the home for personal debt. Sophie's education trust stood separately. Michael was not an automatic beneficiary. The remaining estate would support a housing fund for older widows and selected family members. Michael stared at me. You already decided. I decided after you did. Ms. Green checked my identification. Then she placed the documents in front of me. My hand did not shake. I signed each page slowly. Michael stood before I finished. Lauren followed. Diane gathered her coat. At the door, Michael turned back. You've destroyed this family. I looked toward Sophie, who remained beside the dining table with tears in her eyes. No, I said. Entitlement did that. The door closed behind them. For several minutes, no one moved. Then Sophie crossed the room and put her arms around me. I looked at the table where Michael had once blown out birthday candles, opened Christmas gifts, and done his homework beneath Thomas's impatient supervision. The house had once been the largest gift I intended to give my son. That night, keeping it became the first honest boundary I had ever given him. The first month after that dinner was quieter than I expected. Michael did not call. Lauren sent one message accusing me of humiliating them in front of Sophie and Rebecca. Diane sent none at all. For years, I had feared conflict so deeply that I imagined boundaries would create constant noise arguments. Threats slammed doors, endless explanations. Instead, there was silence. At first, it felt like punishment. Then it began to feel like space. The emergency card charges did not disappear simply because I had confronted him. Rebecca sent Michael a formal accounting request, and after several tense exchanges between attorneys, he agreed to repay the $14,732 through monthly installments. The first payment arrived without a note. I stared at the deposit confirmation on my laptop. It was only $500, but it carried more honesty than all the promises he had made over the previous decade. Michael and Lauren had to face the debts they had hoped my house would erase. They sold the second SUV. Lauren canceled the kitchen renovation she had already begun discussing with contractors. Diane moved into a smaller apartment across town rather than receiving $60,000 from the equity in my home. I did not celebrate any of it. There is no joy in watching your child struggle even when the struggle belongs to him. But I also did not rescue him. That was the part that required practice. Each time I imagined Michael worrying over a bill, an old instinct rose inside me. Send something. Fix it. Make the discomfort stop. Then I remembered him sitting beneath the brass chandelier telling Lauren and Diane that I would sign because I trusted him. I began to understand that every rescue had taught him the same lesson. Consequences were temporary because his mother would eventually absorb them. So I let the consequences remain where they belonged. Sophie continued visiting. At first, she arrived cautiously, as though love for me might be interpreted as betrayal of her parents. I never asked what Michael said about me. I never used her as a messenger. When she complained about them, I listened without encouraging anger. "They're still your parents," I told her one afternoon while we planted winter pansies near the front steps. "You are allowed to love them and still know they were wrong." She pressed soil around a purple flower. "Dad says you care more about proving a point than keeping the family together." I sat back on my heels. "What do you think?" She considered the question carefully. "I think he means keeping things the way they benefited him." I looked at her and felt both pride and sadness. 17 was too young to understand that much about entitlement. But perhaps understanding early would protect her later. The education trust was finalized before spring. It covered tuition books and reasonable living expenses. The trustee paid institutions directly. Michael and Lauren could not borrow from it, redirect it, or use it as collateral. When I told Sophie, she cried, "Grandma, you didn't have to do that." "I know." "Then why?" "Because supporting your education is something I choose. It is not something anyone gets to demand from me." She hugged me tightly. That difference had taken me 70 years to learn. Carol visited every Wednesday. Sometimes we discussed Michael. More often we did not. We went to matinees, tried a pottery class, and began walking in the botanical garden when the weather warmed. One afternoon, after I admitted that the silence from Michael still hurt, Carol said boundaries can feel lonely before they feel peaceful. I carried that sentence home with me. It was true. There were evenings when I stood in the kitchen and reached for the phone. I missed the boy who used to run through the back door with muddy shoes. I missed the young father who cried when Sophie was born. I even missed the adult man who called when he needed something because need had at least created contact. But missing someone does not require reopening the door they tried to walk through with your life in their hands. Rebecca helped me establish a small housing fund in Thomas's name. It provided limited legal and emergency support for older widows facing pressure from relatives over homes deeds or financial authority. I did not create it because I believed every adult child was dangerous. I created it because too many women had been taught that asking questions made them selfish. The first recipient was a 68-year-old widow whose nephew had tried to persuade her to sign a deed she did not understand. When Rebecca told me the transfer had been stopped, I sat quietly in Thomas's study and cried, not from grief, from relief. The house remained mine. I repaired the back fence, replaced the worn porch steps, and revived the garden Thomas once tended with more enthusiasm than skill. I did not stay because I was afraid of change. I stayed because leaving should be a decision, not a surrender. My 71st birthday arrived on a clear October evening. Carol made a reservation at Bellamy's. When I entered the restaurant, the same brass lights glowed against the dark wood. The same soft music drifted from the piano. For one moment, I saw myself standing behind the carved partition with Michael's gift bag in my hand. Then Sophie waved from a table near the windows. Carol was beside her. Rebecca arrived a few minutes later carrying flowers. No one had been pressured to come. No one had lied about being busy. They were simply there. After dinner, the waiter brought chocolate cake with a single candle. This time I ate it. Halfway through dessert, my phone vibrated. A message from Michael. "I still think you overreacted, but I understand now that the house was never mine." I read it twice. It was not an apology. Not yet. But it was the first sentence he had written that did not treat my property as an unpaid obligation. I answered, "When you are ready to speak to me without asking for access money or property, I will listen." He did not reply that evening. 3 weeks later, he asked whether we could meet for coffee. I said yes. We met in a public cafe. He looked older than he had a year before. He did not apologize perfectly. Real people rarely do. He defended himself, then stopped. He blamed pressure, then admitted greed. He said he had always assumed the house would solve everything eventually. I listened. At the end, I told him I still love you. He looked relieved. Then I added, that does not mean the trust changes. His relief faded, but he nodded. It was not reconciliation. It was a beginning. On my 70th birthday, I thought the cruelest thing my son had done was leave me eating alone. I was wrong. The cruelest thing was believing my life's work had already become his property. 1 year later, I sat in the same restaurant and finally understood that a home is not an inheritance, while its owner is still living, and a mother's love is not a signature waiting at the bottom of a page. I never stopped loving my son. I simply stopped allowing him to spend what was still mine. If this story reminds you of a moment when love and obligation became difficult to separate, take a moment to ask yourself whether your generosity is being respected or merely expected. Share your experience if it may help another woman recognize the difference, and subscribe for more stories about people who discover that protecting their dignity does not mean closing their hearts.